Black men come to understand themselves as leaders, right? So leader identity development or leader identity is really how are we understanding ourselves as a leader, right? And we all have a different one. Like I always explain identity as it's called identity because no one can tell you what it means and what it is. So you have to be able to understand your identity. So this article really speaks to a study that I did. It's 11 Black men. So there's 7 undergraduate Black men and then 4 alum from 10 different institutions across the nation. I had people from the Midwest, from the West Coast, the down south, southeast, all over, right? All at predominantly or historically white institutions. They were explaining, how they came to understand their identity as leaders from early in their childhood, elementary school. They talked about being line leaders and crossing guards and
Yep.
singing in a church choir to, high school, being on the debate team or playing sports all the way through college and how they were involved in undergraduate student government, their fraternities, they were resident assistants, orientation leaders. And they really discuss like what contributed to how they see themselves as leaders, and how they come to identify as leaders, and it breaks down into basically 4 different categories or what I call sub processes, because remember it's trying to explain a process, right?
Yes.
So these 4 different sub processes are these what I call external contextual influences. So and there's a model to represent this, right? So like insert model on screen, right? You have these 4 circles that represent these external contextual influences with the process kind of in the middle. And those external contextual influences are environment, society's expectations, racism and systemic oppression, and then the leadership role itself. And those all act on this internal process of the relationships, their sense of self, and how they start to develop their sense of self, and then how they navigate racism while they're leading as a Black man. So they are interconnected and interact. So that really is it in a nutshell. And I definitely encourage folks to dive deeper, because what the best thing about grounded theory is that it's all based in the participants' experiences. So I want you all to engage with that and see these young men's voices come through on how they explain how they come to understand their identity as leaders.
What I really enjoy about your work, Dr. Daniels, is obviously as a Black man, I can put myself in the shoes of, your participants. And I've always found that just so incredibly powerful in how you describe and discuss your participants' experiences. I've read your work where it's inspired me to just want more. So I loved digging into this piece to say, wow, that's incredible. And it had me thinking of this question of what would you say was throughout your research, a surprising or subtle way institutions weaponize their environment against a Black man's developing leader identity?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question, Dr. Lett. And I think that question it probably would put some folks on their heels of thinking of the term weaponizing, but I do think it also doesn't let institutions off the hook, right? As somebody who works at an institution and has made a career of it, I also recognize that there are policies, practices, procedures, historical things that are really not the individuals that run the institutions. They're not necessarily responsible for perpetuating harmful practices, policies, and procedures, but they inherit them a lot of the times. And then if they're not mindful, intentional, conscious of interrupting, disrupting, dismantling those things, they continue to be, right? So I think a lot of the folks in this study and other Black men that I've worked with and other students of color, marginalized populations, their experiences highlight how these institutions are missing appropriate ways to support these students. ways that they can develop them as a whole person, and where they don't have to show up as parts of themselves and kind of
Yes.
compartmentalize, like, okay, I identify as a Black man, but I feel like as a leader, I can't really show up as my Black self authentically. Or if I
Yeah.
identify as a woman, or a Black woman, I can't show up in my womanhood or Blackness, because neither one of those are valued in leadership traditionally. So I think as institutions start to consider ways that they can, and what I hope that this theory does is help operationalize a way to dismantle and interrupt what that looks like, or at least trouble this one size fits all notion around leadership development, or the approaches around leadership development. I think it also requires us to look at what the expectations are, like requirements are for certain leadership roles. So like my folks in housing, like they'll, at least at my institution, they know, like, I always will question, why do you have a GPA requirement for your resident assistants? I'm just curious. Honestly, I hope that there's a real reason. And like a lot of the folks will say, well, we want folks to have a good launching point, because sometimes like resident assistants, they have so much role, like responsibilities, that it can challenge their academics, and we don't want them to fall below a certain GPA or so on and so forth. But data doesn't tell us that having a strong GPA to start prevents students from dropping in their GPA. So I would argue that it's more about looking at the roles and responsibilities themselves to see how can we help support students academically, as opposed to keeping what we call a weak student out of a role or an opportunity to gain experience. So like looking at the requirements to say, like, are these arbitrary expectations that we have or placing on students, and who's being kept out, because these are more of an exclusive metric or measurement than they are really adequately looking at a student's ability to lead or their capacity to lead, right? So I think that those are some of the things that I think about when I'm considering how the institutions weaponize their leadership spaces.
Wow, that's incredible to think about, and it's interesting you brought up housing. It made me think of Dr. Lauren Irwin's, her and Dr. Zach Fosty's book, and they go into housing and how that can be very.
Second plug. Sorry, I couldn't help it.
Yep. Yes. No. Yes. Disrupting white noise. Throw that plug out there. So I think about leadership in terms of some of the challenges they inherit, and there are many jobs. Many folks, even watching this, will say, "I would not want that job," right? And so when you think about navigating some of the racial tension and some of the just the intersecting just challenges facing higher education, it's things that I'm like, Dr. Daniels, you are doing incredible work, and you have alluded to the fact that you're in a position where you are able to research and do the best that you can to support, whether it's marginalized students, underserved, under-resourced. And so this work is incredibly important. What I love talking with you about is how we view leadership. And so you and I have had many discussions on our thoughts on leadership, what it should look like, what it could look like, our respective roles in leadership and leadership adjacent positions. If you were to define leadership in a single sentence without using power, influence, or management, what would your definition be?
Yeah, so I often push back on this question, because I don't think that there ever should be one definition for leadership. I think the context matters. I think
Yes,
the situation matters. I think the people matter. But what I'll do for you and our audience is I'll use my participants' voices to give a definition for leadership based in Black men's experiences. So this is what I came up with using their words, their actual words from the raw data. So I'd say leadership is overcoming challenges by leaning on a community to learn how to lead by example, with an inherent responsibility to make it better for those who come after me.
That's deep. That's deep.
Y'all play that back, take a look at that. But I feel like that is obviously rooted and grounded in Black men's experiences, especially I think leading in predominantly white spaces, to give consideration to that overcoming challenges piece. But I feel like we can all relate to that definition to a certain extent, right? Like some of our most profound leadership moments or moments where we've developed or learned from is a challenge or a failure where we've had to reflect and think deeper about, and maybe go to our mentors or our family or a coach, someone where we could kind of get feedback or hash it out, think through, have a deeper conversation or discussion about. So I think that's where the community comes in. I also think they described like their leadership journey as leading by example. And I think that's modeling the way. Like we have multiple authors who talk about how important it is to model the way for other folks, or be mindful of who's watching and what they're looking for. The impressionable folks, or the people who are following us, who are taking their cues from us. But that last piece really speaks to the generativity. And then there's several folks, and this came up in like the call for leadership research from 2020, is this idea or concept of generativity. And it's not a new concept for anyone. I'm not like giving them credit, but I'm just saying for leadership education researchers. But it really is like, leave it better than what you found it, right? Like, but it's this internal sense that we have to say, like, it's not just about me, right? Like, I know that people are going to come after me or proceed me or succeed me, excuse me, to say, like, I want this space to be better. I want it to be more welcoming for the people who look like me, have similar experiences. I want the path to be easier from people from Youngstown or Lorraine to be able to get to this particular space. I don't want them to have to go through the same things that I went through that were challenging or difficult, if they don't necessarily have to, especially if those situations are instances caused harm, right? So I think that definition allows for us to, it gives more space for leadership to breathe and be expansive and not be so restrictive, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I really loved asking that question, because when we've had our talks about, what leadership looks like, how would you define a leader? I'm be honest, Dr. Daniels never gives me a straight answer, y'all. I'm like running in circles, but I've appreciate just the breadth and depth of the responses and how it's helped me grow, especially along my journey. And Dr. Daniels, as we wrap up this incredible interview, that you've inspired someone. Someone will leave this interview feeling like they can make a difference in their community in the ways in which you've made a difference in my life and so many other people's lives. So for anyone inspired by this interview, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. Honestly, that's the most, I guess, social media platform that I use most frequently. I'm bookable. So like if you need some kind of workshop, keynote, if you want to write, collaborate, I have a collaborative spirit. I am on the tenure track, so just keep that in mind. Like, it's not about being busy, it's about being intentional and pointed with my time. I'm a father and a husband first. So I try to be very, very mindful and protecting that time, but I am collaborative. I like to meet new people. I like to engage. So if you're open to having a conversation about this work or any of my other work, I'm a leadership education scholar who focuses on underrepresented students, marginalized populations. I'm about making system changes and understanding how leadership contributes to a myriad of things. So whether that's career success or emotional well-being or wellness and flourishing, I'd love to chat with folks. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email, mdaniels367@gmail.com. Yeah, any of those spaces, I'd be more than happy to connect with folks.
Yes, and I will put Dr. Daniels' contact information in the description. Dr. Daniels, you have to tell us, what takeaways from this interview should viewers leave with?
Yeah, no, that's a phenomenal question as well. You just coming with that hot fire on the question side. Appreciate you, Dr. Lett. So, I would say this piece specifically, the journal College Student Development piece, this article, I think it gives a resource for people who are starting to notice that we have to do more to support our students beyond the traditional leadership development theories or theories that we use to create our programs. So obviously this focuses on Black men. I mean, that's my heart. That's where, my research has been for a long time. But it also gives a roadmap for anyone else who wants to do a study on any other population to look at. So give that consideration. I think it allows for folks to think about how they're starting with themselves and their work, like asking, what do I know about society's understanding or perception or definition of leadership that maybe needs to be tweaked, troubled, altered, challenged, rethought. Evaluate your institution for policies and practices that might be harmful, archaic, historically inaccurate, that are leaving people out of different opportunities like formal leadership roles. I think engage with your Black men on a personal level, like get to know them, understanding them as individuals. We are not a monolith. I think understanding like the different contexts that they've grown up in and where they're at now, what they aspire to be, what their goals are, and then curate an experience that accounts for their identity, their whole self. Like representation matters, help bring in more people that look like them so they can get mentors to get them to where they need to be. Yeah, honestly, I think those are the things that I would say to lead with. Continuously read, y'all. Pick books up that stretch your brain. Listen to podcasts that engage different perspectives. I will say Dr. Lett is a brilliant scholar in his own right. His humility falls short of what he's explaining to y'all today. Pick up his work, take a look at how you want to find ways to bring in mentorship to the spaces you're in. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of takeaways from today. You don't have to cut me off because I could keep going. The people need to know.
The people need to know. Listen, I will say, when Dr. Daniel said listen to podcasts, he was really throwing me a shout out, and I'll take that. So, this has been incredible. Dr. Daniels is now I can't share my mentor with everybody. He's been a great mentor, right? But also father, husband, just so many things. Now you've been blessed with getting to know Dr. Michael Daniels. So Dr. Daniels, it's been an honor. And I will say, you go and get a second PhD, you might as well go to The Ohio State University because that's the second ranked school after Kent State University. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Nobody has to worry about me getting another terminal degree. I promise you that. I won't want to be in many other folks' classrooms. I want to just hang out with people in their class, but I'm not pursuing another degree. So I might have to just ride down to Columbus and hit up one of my colleagues, maybe Dr. Stephen Quay or somebody, see if they let me audit the class. I'm not getting another degree. You ain't got to worry.
Dr. Daniels, it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. And you've changed someone's life from this interview. So thank you.
Yeah, respect. Appreciate it.